The rain hit the courthouse steps like it had somewhere better to be. Zoe Daniels walked out of that building at 11:43 in the morning, and she was smiling. Not the kind of smile you perform for other people, not the kind you paste on when you're trying to look fine. This was quiet, private, the kind that starts somewhere deep in the chest before it reaches the face. Behind her, the heavy courthouse doors burst open. "Zoe!" Richard Cole's voice cracked across the wet air like a whip. He was standing at the top of the steps in his dark gray coat, rain beginning to flatten his perfect hair, and everything about him said he was not a man used to being walked away from. "You think this is over?" he called out. "You think you're just going to walk out of here and be fine? You have nothing. You hear me? Nothing, or you'll come crawling back within a month." The people nearby turned to look. A woman in a yellow raincoat pulled her umbrella closer. A court officer glanced over, then looked away. "The kind of scene people file under none of my business." Zoe paused on the bottom step. She turned slightly, just enough for him to see her face. She didn't yell back, didn't raise her hand, didn't say a single word. She just looked at him the way you look at a door you've been trying to open for years, and finally realized was never locked from the outside. Then she turned back around, and that was when the car appeared. Black, long, moving through the rain with the kind of quiet that expensive things have. It stopped in front of her like it had been waiting, like it had always been waiting, and the door opened before anyone touched it from the outside. A man stepped out. He was tall, Korean, dressed in dark clothing, and he moved the way people move when they have never once in their life been in a hurry. There was nothing loud about him, nothing flashy, just a quality of stillness that made the rain around him seem like it was behaving. He walked directly to Zoe, shrugged off his coat in one smooth motion, and draped it over her shoulders without asking. "You're late," he said. His voice was low, measured. Zoe looked up at him. "I had to close a chapter." Richard, still standing on the steps, had gone completely silent. His mouth was open. A drop of rain ran down his forehead, and he didn't even wipe it. The man glanced up at Richard once, the way you glance at a sign you don't need to read twice, and then looked back at Zoe. She walked to the car. She didn't look back. The door closed. The car pulled away. And Richard Cole stood in the rain alone, holding papers he had been so proud of 3 hours ago, with the distinct feeling that something had just happened that he did not fully understand yet. What kind of woman smiles when her marriage ends? What kind of woman walks out of a divorce into the arms of a man the whole city is afraid of? And who exactly is Kim Chul-moo? That is the story we are telling today. If this opening stopped you mid-scroll and made something shift inside your chest, stay right here. This kind of story was built for people who understand that some endings are not losses. They are long overdue exits. Subscribe and stay close, because the next 60 minutes are going to take you somewhere. And if you've ever had to leave something that was slowly making you disappear, so drop a word in the comments. Just one word. We'll know what you mean. Now let us go back to the beginning, because Zoe Daniels did not start as a woman who smiled when things fell apart. She started as a girl who believed, truly believed, that love was enough to build a life on. She had come to America from Lagos at 22, carrying one large suitcase, a folder of academic certificates, and the kind of determination that looks naive until it works. She had a degree in international business. She had a sharp mind. She had plans. What she did not have was a network, connections, or money. What she did not have was someone in her corner who understood how this country works when you are new to it. She found work as an administrative assistant at a property management firm in Manhattan. Entry level. Long hours. The kind of job where you learn everything and get credit for nothing. She shared a tiny apartment in the Bronx with 2 other women, one of whom slept through alarms and one of whom cooked fish at midnight. Zoe did not complain. She was building something. She met Richard Cole at a work event in her 2nd year. He was a client of the firm, a property developer, with old money manners and a smile that knew exactly what it was doing. He was 12 years older than her, polished in the way that takes decades to manufacture, and he paid attention to her in a room full of people who were used to being paid attention to. He asked her to dinner. She said yes. Within a year they were engaged. Within 18 months they were married, and Zoe, who had come to America with a folder full of plans, put every single one of those plans carefully inside a drawer and told herself she would come back to them later. Later never quite arrived. Richard's world moved fast, and it moved on his terms. There were dinners to attend, events to appear at, a social calendar that belonged to him but required her presence. He liked her beside him. He liked introducing her. He told people she was brilliant, which was true, and he told it in a way that always landed just slightly behind the fact that he had chosen her, which meant he deserved some of the credit. Zoe noticed it, but told herself she was being too sensitive. The apartment they shared in the Upper East Side was large and beautiful, and it never quite felt like hers. Her clothes were in the wardrobe. Her face was in the bathroom mirror every morning. But the decisions about the furniture, so the holidays, the dinner guests, the weekend plans, those were Richard's, always framed as suggestions, always landing as instructions. She stopped working 2 years into the marriage, not because Richard demanded it directly, but because he managed to make working feel like a statement against him. Too many dinners where he mentioned how tired she looked. Too many mornings where he noted that she was rushing again, that maybe she was spreading herself thin, that he made enough for both of them. Did she not trust that? She trusted it. She quit, and the drawer where she had placed her plans quietly locked itself shut. By year 3 of the marriage, something had changed in Richard that was harder to name. He had always been controlling, but in the early days it had worn the costume of love. He called to check on her because he cared. So he questioned her choices because he had more experience. He guided her because she was still finding her feet. By year 3, the costume had come off, and there was nothing underneath it that looked like care. He talked about her money, his money, about what he provided, about how grateful she should be, about what her life looked like before him. These conversations happened at dinner tables and in quiet moments, at home, and sometimes in front of other people, delivered as jokes that weren't quite jokes, the kind that make a whole table laugh while one person sits perfectly still and breathes through it. One night at a dinner party hosted by one of Richard's business associates, Zoe made a comment about a deal being discussed. She had done her research. She always did her research because she was still under everything, not a woman with a sharp mind. Her comment was accurate. It was pointed. The associate raised his eyebrows with genuine interest. Richard laughed. "My wife used to read business news like it was a hobby," he said, "back when she was working. Now she just keeps up for conversation." He smiled at her. "You're adorable, babe." The table moved on. Zoe picked up her glass of water and looked at the surface of the table and counted to 6. That was the night she started taking late walks. Not long ones, just 20 minutes, sometimes 30, down the quiet streets near their building. She told Richard she needed air. He told her to be careful and went back to his phone. Those walks were the only time she felt like herself. The city at that hour was a different version of itself, quieter and more honest. And Zoe would walk and breathe and remember, on in small pieces, who she had been before she handed the shape of her life to someone else. She did not know that someone was watching those walks. She did not know that the man in the black car parked 2 blocks from her building was not there by accident. She did not know any of that yet. What she knew was that on the 4th Tuesday of October, While she was walking home past the small park on 72nd Street, something happened that broke every quiet night she had built around herself into pieces. Richard had been at a client dinner. She had chosen not to attend. He had not pushed, which should have been its own kind of signal, but she had been too grateful for the space to question it. She was almost home when her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. 4 words. Ask your husband tonight. She stopped walking, or read it again, looked up and down the empty street as if whoever sent it might still be standing nearby. No one. She walked the rest of the way home with the message open on her phone, reading it over and over until the words stopped making any shape at all. Richard came home at 11. Good mood, jacket over his arm. He kissed her on the cheek and went to pour himself a drink and told her the dinner had gone well. Good, she said. What client was it? Barker Associates. You've met David Barker. She had. She remembered him. She also, in that moment, remembered something she had overheard 3 weeks ago. A name dropped in a phone call Richard had taken in the study, with the door not completely closed. A name that was not David Barker. A name she had noted without knowing why. I got a strange message tonight, she said. Richard turned from the cabinet. From who? Unknown number. It said, ask your husband tonight. Something moved across Richard's face. It was fast, and she nearly missed it. His expression settled back into mild confusion immediately, the way a card player can put a card down and look like they were never holding it. Probably spam, he said. People send that kind of thing to random numbers. 4 words. Ask your husband tonight. That's specific for spam. Zoe. His voice went gentle, that particular kind of gentle that was actually a door closing. You've been home alone too much. You're reading into things. She looked at him. He looked back. Come to bed, he said. You look tired. She did not come to bed. She sat in the kitchen for another hour after he fell asleep, the message still open on her phone, unturning over something she had been turning over for a long time, but had never let herself name out loud. She was not suspicious by nature. That was the thing about her that Richard had always counted on without ever acknowledging it. She wanted to believe good things about people. It was both her greatest quality and the crack in her armor that had let 3 years of slow erosion pass without her calling it by its name. But something had changed that night. Something had shifted in the room between them, quiet as a door closing in another part of the house. She could not prove anything. She did not know anything, not yet. But the woman who went to bed that night was not quite the same woman who had woken up that morning. She was beginning to pay attention. 3 weeks later, on a night that started exactly like every other night, and Zoe was on one of her late walks when the city stopped being quiet in the wrong way. She heard them before she saw them. 2 voices, then 3, sharp and fast, coming from the side street that cut between the apartment buildings. She was almost past it when a man came running out of the darkness and nearly knocked her off her feet. Behind him, footsteps. Fast. Zoe pressed herself against the wall, heart slamming, and in the space of 3 seconds, she made a decision that was not really a decision. It was instinct. She stepped sideways into the narrow service alcove between 2 buildings and pulled herself as far back as the shadows would take her. Someone grabbed her arm. She opened her mouth. A hand, light and firm, covered it. Close to her ear, a voice, calm as someone commenting on the weather, said, "Stay quiet. If you want to live." She went still. Not because she was paralyzed, not because she had given up, but because something in that voice, the evenness of it, the complete lack of panic, told her that whoever was holding her in the dark had been in situations like this before and had come out the other side of all of them. 3 men ran past the entrance to the alcove, fast, loud, gone. Silence. The hand fell away from her mouth. Zoe turned around. The man standing in the dark behind her was the one from the courthouse. She didn't know that yet, of course, because the courthouse was still months in the future. But she would remember his face from this moment. The way it held itself completely composed in the dark. The way his eyes caught what little light there was and did not seem alarmed by anything. He was Korean. Tall. The kind of still that is not the absence of energy, but the complete control of it. They stared at each other in a narrow alcove in Manhattan at 11:40 at night, while the sound of shouting faded 3 streets away. Zoe breathed. He waited. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She straightened. Her heart was still going fast, but her voice came out steady, which surprised even her. "Neither should you." Something shifted in his expression. Very slight. The way a window moves in a breeze, barely enough to notice. He looked at her for another moment, then looked past her toward the street, the way a person does when they are calculating multiple things at once, and none of those things are about her specifically. "Go home," he said. "Take the long way. Don't stop." "Who were those men?" He looked back at her. "No, not your concern." "They almost ran me over. I think that makes them slightly my concern." Another shift, this one closer to something. If she had been watching very carefully, she might have called it the beginning of something like interest. "Go home," he said again. "You're safe." She looked at him for one more second. Then she walked out of the alcove, turned right instead of left, and took the long way home the way he'd told her to. She did not know his name. She did not know that he had been in that alcove on purpose. She did not know that he had seen her come this way 3 times already, and had made certain calculations about who she was and what she was connected to. She did not know that Kim Chul-moo had been watching her for nearly a month. She told herself, walking home, that it had been nothing. A city encounter. The kind of strange brush with the chaos of New York that happens and then fades. She would not think about it tomorrow. She thought about it for 3 days. The 4th day, she went to the same park at the same time, not because she was looking for him, she told herself firmly, but because it was her walk, and she was not about to change her route because of one strange night. He was not there. The 5th day, she went again. He was not there either. She went home, made tea, and sat with the very interesting realization that she was slightly disappointed, which was ridiculous. She did not even know the man's name. He had covered her mouth in a dark alley and told her to go home. There was nothing about that to be attracted to. She made a mental note to look into therapy. The 6th day she went, and he was leaning against the wall of the building at the corner of 72nd, coat dark, hands in his pockets, looking at his phone with the focused expression of a man completing a task. He looked up as she approached. "You walk this way every night," he said. Not a question. "You've been counting," she said. "Observing. What's the difference?" He considered this with what seemed like genuine seriousness. "Counting is just numbers. Observing is understanding patterns." She should have kept walking. Every sensible part of her brain was sending the same memo. You do not know this man. You know nothing about him. You are a married woman, and this is a stranger on a street corner, and you should keep walking. She stopped walking. "Zoe," she said, and held out her hand. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Then he shook it. "Chul-moo," he said. "Is that a first name or a last name?" "Yes," she almost laughed. It came out as a breath instead. "Helpful." "Kim Chul-moo," he said. "The first is family." She nodded. "Do you live around here, Kim Chul-moo?" "No." "Do you work around here?" "Sometimes." She looked at him. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" He looked back. I wasn't aware there was something to make easy. And that, she would think later, was the exact moment she should have walked away. Not because he was rude or dangerous in any obvious way, but because she was smiling. A real one. The involuntary kind. The kind that tells you the truth about yourself, whether you want to hear it or not. She was smiling, and she could not remember the last time someone made her smile without it costing her something. She went home and did not think about it. She thought about nothing else. Meanwhile, across the city, in an office high enough that the streets below looked like a different country, Richard Cole was on a phone call that had been going on for 37 minutes and was not going well. "I told you the timeline," he said, voice low. "Nothing has changed." A voice on the other end said something clipped and precise. "The money moves when I say it moves," Richard said. That was the arrangement. More words from the other end. Richard's jaw tightened. "Don't threaten me. You have too much invested in this to start making threats now." He ended the call and sat for a moment looking at the skyline. Then he picked up his drink, finished it, and called his lawyer. He did not tell his wife any of this. He never did. He had never once considered that his wife, the woman he had trained into small and manageable and quietly grateful, might one day become a problem for him. That was the second biggest mistake of his life. The first was filing for divorce. But we are not there yet. 3 weeks passed after Zoe met Chulmu on the corner of 72nd. She saw him 6 more times in those 3 weeks, twice on the street near the park. Once outside the small bookstore, she stopped in on Saturday afternoons. Once, startlingly, in the lobby of the building where her old work colleague held a small birthday gathering, though he was gone before she could cross the room to him, and she spent the rest of the evening wondering if she had imagined it. Their conversations were short and strange, and somehow the most honest she had in any given week. He asked her questions no one else asked. So not where she had grown up, or what her husband did, or what part of Africa she was from, which was what most people asked with that particular brightness that meant they wanted to show off that they knew Africa was a continent. He asked what she had wanted to do before she stopped doing it. He asked what she thought about quietly that she never said out loud. She asked him on the 4th meeting what he actually did. He looked at the middle distance for a moment. "Business," he said. "That covers a lot of ground." "It does." "Legal business?" He looked at her, a long, considering look. Then, "What makes you ask that?" "The night in the alley," she said. "Those men weren't running from police. They were running from something else." "And what do you think that something else was?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you move through this city in a specific way. You show up in places. You're never loud. You watch things. And that night, you were exactly where something dangerous was happening, and you were not scared." He was quiet. "You're not going to confirm or deny anything," she said. "No." "That's also an answer." He almost smiled. It was the kind of almost smile that a face makes when it has not been smiled often enough, and the muscles are slightly surprised by the request. "You are more observant than you let yourself know," he said. She didn't respond to that, not because she had nothing to say, but because it landed somewhere soft, and she needed a moment. If you are watching this, and you have ever had someone say one true thing to you after a long time of being surrounded by noise, Tibort, if you have ever been seen after a long period of being looked past, you know exactly what Zoe felt in that moment. Drop what you're feeling in the comments right now. Not a summary, just whatever comes. This community understands. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Not because we're asking you to click a button, but because the rest of this story is the part you actually came for, and you shouldn't miss it. At home, things had not improved. Richard had grown quieter in a way that was not peace. It was the silence of someone making decisions they have not announced. He watched her more, asked where she had been more, picked up conversations he had dropped weeks ago, and returned to them at unexpected angles. One evening over dinner, he said, "You seem different lately. She looked up. How so? I don't know. I'm lighter. He said it in a way that was not quite a compliment. Is that a problem? He picked up his fork. Just an observation. She said nothing. Are you seeing someone? He asked. The way he asked it, flat and direct, told her he had been sitting on the question for a while. She put her fork down. What made you ask that? You're happier than you should be. She stared at him. Happier than I should be. He heard himself. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I just meant, things between us haven't been great, and I'm what, Richard? I'm not crying enough? I'm not performing the right amount of misery? What is the correct happiness level for a woman in this marriage? Please tell me so I can calibrate. He looked at her. You've changed. Have I? The woman I married wouldn't talk to me like this. The woman you married, she said, picking her fork back up, was very, very tired. They finished dinner in silence. The night he went to his study, and she heard him on the phone again, that low, tense voice he used when he did not want her to hear the words. She sat in the living room with a book open on her lap and listened to the shape of the conversation without the content, the way you read weather from the sky before the rain. Something was coming. She did not know what. She knew enough to stop being surprised by it. The message that arrived on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later was not from an unknown number this time. It came through the building's front desk, a sealed envelope, no return address, hand-delivered. The doorman said a woman had dropped it off. Young, professional, he didn't recognize her. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. On the paper was a name, a set of dates, and a sequence of numbers that meant nothing to Zoe on their own. At the bottom, written by hand in clean, precise print, your husband has been moving money for people who hurt other people. He has been doing it for 4 years. You deserve to know before it becomes your problem too. She sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in her hands for a long time. Her first thought was that it was a manipulation. Someone with a grudge against Richard. Someone trying to use her. Her second thought was the message from the unknown number 3 weeks ago. Ask your husband tonight. Her third thought was the half-heard phone calls, the tightness in Richard's voice, the way he moved when he was hiding something, a particular stillness in the shoulders that she had noticed but never named. Her fourth thought was Kim Chul-moo. She had not seen him in 5 days. Their encounters had always been on his schedule, though she had never acknowledged that to herself until now. He appeared when he appeared. She did not have his number. She had no way to reach him. She folded the letter and placed it inside the book she had been pretending to read. Then she went to the kitchen and made coffee, and stood at the window looking at the street below, and did a very specific kind of thinking. The kind where you are not deciding what is true yet. You are deciding what to do with the possibility that it might be. By the time Richard came home that evening, she had decided 2 things. 1, she would say nothing to him. Not yet. 2, she needed more information. He came through the door smelling of cold air and the particular cologne that had once been the smell of safety and was now just a smell. He kissed her cheek. She smiled. She asked about his day. He said fine, the usual, and went to change his clothes. She stood in the kitchen and thought about the letter. She thought about the words he had used over the years, said lightly, said as jokes, said in that tone of patient explanation. Without me, you'd still be struggling. I gave you this life. You wouldn't know how to manage without the structure I provide. Said across 3 years, until they had become the furniture of the house, part of the permanent fixtures that you stop seeing because they have always been there. She thought about what it means to be told you cannot survive without someone. She thought about what it feels like when you start to believe it. And then she thought about Kim Chul-moo saying, very quietly, on a sidewalk at night, "You are more observant than you let yourself know." She took the letter out of the book that evening after Richard fell asleep and read it again twice. Then she opened her laptop and started to research. She was careful, and she was systematic, the way she had been in her old job when she was building reports that needed to hold up under examination. She looked up the company names mentioned in the letter. She looked up the dates against public records. She was not a forensic accountant, and she was not an investigator, and most of what she was seeing meant nothing concrete, just fragments, suggestions, edges of a shape she couldn't fully see. But the shape was there. When she closed the laptop at 2 in the morning and sat in the dark of the kitchen with cold coffee and a feeling she had not felt in a long time. Not fear. Not quite. More like clarity. The kind that comes when something you suspected is confirmed, not loudly, but softly. Not with drama, but with the small, steady sound of a thing clicking into place. She went to bed. She did not sleep. 3 streets away, in an unmarked car parked where the yellow light of a street lamp didn't quite reach, a man sat looking at a building. Kim Chul-moo was not a man who second-guessed himself. He had made decisions in his life, some of them irreversible, and he did not sit in the dark, picking at them after the fact. That was not how he functioned, but tonight he was sitting in the dark, picking at something. It was not a decision exactly, more of an unexpected development, the kind you plan around but do not fully plan for. He had come to New York for Richard Cole. He had known about Cole for 14 months, tracked the money, built the case. Cole had been cleaning money for a criminal network that crossed through Seoul, through 3 other cities, and ended in ledgers that belonged to people Chul-moo had personal reasons to hold accountable. He had not accounted for the wife. He had known she existed, of course. He had watched the building for weeks before he ever crossed paths with her. He had categorized her initially as a variable, someone to account for, but not engage with, a peripheral element in a calculation that did not require her directly. And then she had walked out of that alley, with her heart rate elevated and her voice completely steady, and said, "Neither should you." And the calculation had changed in a way he had not authorized. He did not do this. He did not become personally involved with peripheral elements. His work required the opposite. You noticed everything, and you attached yourself to nothing. He ran a hand over his face in the dark of the car. The problem was not that he found her interesting, although he did, in the specific way that a person finds interesting another person who is more than they are currently being allowed to be. The problem was that the timeline had shifted. Cole was moving toward a decision. Chul-moo could feel it in the data the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Cole was going to do something soon, and when Cole moved, everyone in his immediate radius was going to be affected, including Zoe. He picked up his phone and made a call. "She received the letter," said the woman on the other end. "And?" "She was up until 2. She researched. She's smart." "I know she's smart." A pause from the other end. "Chul-moo, you understand the situation?" "I understand the situation." "She cannot be a complication." He looked at the building, at the window on the 4th floor where the light had gone off 40 minutes ago. "She won't be," he said. He ended the call. He sat for another few minutes. Then he started the car and drove. He told himself it was a professional situation that required professional management. He told himself his interest in Zoe Daniels was entirely strategic. She was close to a target. Understanding her helped him understand the target. There was nothing else to it. Kim Chul-moo was very good at many things. Lying to himself was not yet one of them. The next time Zoe saw him, she was not on her walk. She was in the small Korean grocery on 74th Street, standing in front of a shelf of instant noodles with the focused expression of a woman who was not actually looking at instant noodles, but was using them as an excuse to stand still and think. She had been doing a lot of that lately, standing in places, using the physical act of being somewhere as cover for the mental act of working something out. She heard the door open behind her. She did not turn around immediately. Something made her wait. Some instinct. "You don't seem like an instant noodle person," said his voice. She turned. He was standing 3 feet away, holding a small basket, still looking at the shelf beside her, with the same focused neutrality he brought to everything. Like the shelf of noodles deserved his full professional attention. "I'm not," she said. "I'm using them to think." "About what?" She looked at him. She had been carrying the letter for 4 days. She had told no one. She had nowhere to put it, and no one she trusted enough to put it with. And the weight of it had been sitting in the middle of her chest like a stone she kept trying to breathe around. "Someone sent me a letter," she said. "About my husband." He said nothing. His expression did not change. But something very small happened in the region of his eyes, a fractional adjustment, and she was watching closely enough to catch it. "What kind of letter?" he said. "The kind that explains certain things," she said. "Certain phone calls, uncertain names, certain behavior that I had filed under strange but ignored. And now? And now I don't think I can ignore it anymore." She put the noodles back on the shelf. "I think I've been standing in the middle of something I wasn't told about. I think there are people around my husband who are not safe. And I think," she said, watching his face carefully, "that you might already know some of this." The grocery store was quiet. A refrigerator hummed near the back. Someone moved in the next aisle, and their footsteps made a soft sound on the linoleum. Chulmu looked at her for a long moment. Then he set his basket down on the shelf. "Walk with me," he said. They walked 2 blocks to a small park and sat on a bench with enough distance between them to be strangers, and enough proximity to speak quietly. The sky was the color of old silver. The city moved around them without looking at them. "How much do you know?" he said. Not a question exactly, a measurement. "Enough to be frightened," she said. "Not enough to understand it." "Are you frightened right now?" She thought about it honestly. "No. I think I passed frightened 2 nights ago. I'm on the other side of it now. It feels like, I don't know, like when you've been holding your breath for so long you finally just exhale. The fear is still there, but it's not running the show anymore." He looked at her the way he sometimes looked at her, like she was a sentence he was translating in real time into a language that meant something to him. "Your husband," he said slowly, "has been involved in financial arrangements that are not legal. Money that belongs to certain organizations moves through structures he controls. He provides the infrastructure. They provide the volume. He is well compensated." She absorbed this. "How long have you known?" 14 months. She turned to look at him directly. "And the letter, the first message to my phone, were those from you?" A pause, brief. "From people I work with." "Why?" "Because the situation is moving toward a point where proximity to Richard Cole becomes dangerous. I needed you to have enough information to make decisions without being blindsided." "You needed me." She said it carefully. "Not you, personally. As a strategy." He did not look away. "Initially." That word landed between them like a coin dropped on a hard floor. Both of them heard it. Neither of them immediately picked it up. "Who are you?" she said. "Sawden, really." "I told you my name. You told me 2 words. That's not the same as who you are." He was quiet for a moment. The park around them went through its ordinary city rhythms. A dog walker, 2 children on scooters, a man talking loudly into his phone. "I work for people who have interests in making sure certain networks are held accountable," he said. "Officially, I run an investment company. What I actually do is more complicated." "Criminal?" "Adjacent," she almost laughed. You're using very precise language to say very vague things. Yes. Is that a habit or a skill? Both. She looked at the path ahead of them. A leaf moved across it in a small wind. So my husband is laundering money for dangerous people. You've been investigating him for over a year, and I have been living in that apartment, eating dinner across from him, not having no idea. You had more idea than you gave yourself credit for, he said. You noticed the phone calls. You noticed the behavior. You were paying attention. You just didn't have the framework to understand what you were seeing. That's a kind way to say I was naive. It's not kindness. It's accuracy. He looked at her. There is a difference between not knowing and not wanting to know. You were doing the first, not the second. She sat with that. What happens now? She said. That depends on your husband. He has been under pressure from his partners. They do not believe he is as useful as he once was. He is going to make a move soon. We believe a preemptive one, to shift attention and protect himself. What kind of move? He may involve you, use your name, and create distance between himself and certain transactions by suggesting they were managed through you. The bench was cold under her hands. She pressed them flat against it. He would do that. It was not a question. He would do that, Chul Mu confirmed, without judgment, just the plain fact of it. She breathed out slowly. So I need to not be there when that happens. Yes. And you're telling me this because... He was quiet for a moment. 2 moments. The kind of quiet that has something moving underneath it. Because it is the right thing to do, he said finally. She looked at him. He was looking ahead at the path, at nothing specific, with the focused composure of a man who has just said something true and is not entirely comfortable with how true it is. Chul Mu. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. Simple. Direct. Since something moved through his face that he did not entirely manage to control. It was there for less than a second, and then it was gone. But she saw it. She had been watching his face long enough to know that what she had just seen was not a small thing for him. He nodded once. Go home. Be normal. Don't let him know you've changed your position. And then? Then wait. I will tell you when. She stood up from the bench. He remained seated. They were doing this thing they did, not saying the obvious things, letting the air carry them instead. You could have just sent the letters, she said. You didn't have to be there in the alley. You didn't have to talk to me. He said nothing. Observing patterns, she said, and walked away. She did not look back. Behind her, on the bench, Kim Chul Mu sat for another 3 minutes watching the path where she had walked. Then he picked up his phone and made 2 calls, both of them professional, both of them efficient. After the second call, he sat for a moment longer. He thought about the word she had used. Initially, he had used it himself. About her. About what she had been to him at the beginning of this. And she had heard it with the precision of someone who processes language, the way a musician processes pitch. She had heard the weight in it, the admission that something had shifted. He had not meant to say it. He was fairly certain he had meant to say it. He stood up from the bench, straightened his coat, and walked back into the city. The next 2 weeks in the Cole apartment were the strangest Zoe had ever lived through. She was performing a version of herself that was 2 weeks behind, where she actually stood. She cooked dinners she did not care about. She asked Richard about his day, and listened to the answers with the surface of her attention, while the deeper current of her went on thinking, preparing, calculating. She was discovering something about herself that surprised her. She was good at this, not the pretending exactly, but the management of herself under pressure, the ability to continue functioning while carrying knowledge that would have shattered her 2 years ago. She thought of it like a muscle she hadn't known she had. It had apparently been there the whole time, unused, waiting. Richard, for his part, was wound tight and trying not to show it. He slept less, checked his phone more. Twice she heard him arguing quietly in the study, and both times when she knocked to ask if he wanted tea. He opened the door with the easy smile of a man who had been practicing that smile for 30 years. "Just work," he said. "Okay," she said, and handed him the tea. On a Thursday evening, he came home with a bottle of wine and a kind of deliberate good mood, the kind people manufacture when they want to have a certain kind of conversation and want the atmosphere cooperative before they start. He poured 2 glasses, sat beside her on the sofa, asked how her day had been. She knew, before he said the next thing, that something was coming. "I've been thinking about us," he said. She held her glass and waited. "Things haven't been great," he said. "I know that. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about whether the things that aren't great are fixable." She kept her face open and soft. Listening face. Cooperative face. "I think," he said, looking at the wine glass, "that we want different things. I think we've been wanting different things for a while. I think the honest thing, the mature thing, is to acknowledge that." "Are you saying you want a divorce?" she asked. He looked at her, a flicker of something. He had expected more resistance in her voice. "I think it might be for the best," he said, "for both of us. You could go back to working, build something of your own. You've mentioned wanting that." He had never once heard her mention wanting that. She had stopped mentioning it years ago because mentioning it produced the same result as mentioning anything she wanted for herself. But she had not said it to him recently. The fact that he was saying it now, framing the exit as something she wanted, something he was generously providing, told her everything about what was happening. He was moving her out of range. "I see," she said. "I know this is a lot to take in." "It is," she said. And then, because she was still holding the letter in the book on her nightstand, and because she had been thinking for 2 weeks about what it meant to be told you cannot survive without someone, she said, "Where do we go from here?" "I've spoken to my lawyer," he said. "I want to make sure you're taken care of. We'll work out an arrangement." Taken care of. An arrangement. The words of a man who already knows what the papers say and is now managing her emotional state to make sure she signs them without looking too closely. "Okay," she said. He blinked. "Okay? If you feel that's what's best." He looked at her with the specific expression of a man who had prepared for a difficult conversation and found a door already open. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made him slightly suspicious, which told her something about how little he actually knew her. "I thought you would," he paused. "I thought this would be harder." "Were you hoping it would be harder?" "No, of course not." She looked at him steadily. "Then good. We're agreed." He picked up his wine. He was not quite satisfied with how this had gone. She could see it in the set of his shoulders. But he had gotten what he wanted, and there was no graceful way to complain about that. "I'll have my lawyer reach out to you," he said. "That's fine." She went to bed that night and lay in the dark, and felt something she had not expected to feel. Relief. Not complicated relief. Not relief tinged with grief, just clean, open relief. Like a window finally opened in a room that had been closed for too long. She was done. She had not known how done she was until the option to leave appeared, and every single cell in her body said yes immediately, without discussion. She was also aware, in the clarity of that dark room, that she was not entirely safe yet. The papers were coming. The arrangement was coming. And underneath all of it was the thing Chul-Mu had told her, the possibility that Richard intended to use her name as a buffer between himself and things that could destroy him. She needed to be careful. She needed to be faster than Richard expected. The lawyer Richard had mentioned reached out within 2 days. His name was Parsons. He was friendly in a professional way that communicated clearly, that his friendliness was a billable service. He emailed her a summary of the proposed divorce terms that she read 3 times. On the 3rd read, she found it. A clause, buried in the middle of a paragraph about shared financial management during the marriage, that attributed certain investment decisions to both parties jointly. Decisions she had never been part of. Decisions that, if examined by the right set of eyes, would connect her name to accounts she had never touched. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and read the clause 5 more times. Then she closed the laptop, went to her bedroom, took out her phone, and typed a message to the number Chul Mu had given her at their last meeting. 4 words, because he had a particular relationship with 4 words. I found it. Call me. He called in 11 minutes. Tell me exactly what it says, he said. She read it to him. He was quiet for a moment. Then, send it to me, the full document. It came from his lawyer. I know. Send it. She forwarded the email. She heard him open it on his end. The quality of his silence changed. The way silence changes when a person is reading something that confirms something they already suspected, but had not yet confirmed. He moved faster than I expected, Chul Mu said. Is that bad? It means he's frightened. Frightened people make mistakes. A pause. Do not sign anything. I had no intention of signing anything. Good. I need 2 days. For what? To make sure that when he tries to use your name, there is nothing there to use. She stood in her bedroom with her phone pressed to her ear, and outside the window, the city went through its enormous, uncaring rhythms, and she felt, in that moment, not small, the way the city usually made people feel small, but oddly enormous. Like she was standing in the exact right place, at the exact right moment, and something that had been building for a long time was about to break open. Chul Mu, she said. Yes. When this is over. She stopped. He waited. Never mind, she said. A pause on his end, longer than a professional pause. 2 days, he said. Stay close to home. She ended the call and stood for a moment with the phone in her hand. Then she sat down on the bed and did something she had not done in a very long time. She cried. Not the kind of crying that is about sadness exactly. The kind that is a release of pressure. The kind your body does when it has been holding something for so long that it needs to physically move that thing through and out. She cried for the woman she had been at 22 with her folder of plans. She cried for the drawer she had locked those plans inside. She cried for the dinners and the silences and the party where someone had laughed at her accent while she smiled and counted to 6. She cried for about 12 minutes. Then she washed her face, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and started writing down everything she remembered about every conversation she had overheard, every name, every date, every number that had crossed her awareness in 3 years of living with Richard Cole. She wrote for 2 hours. She had a better memory than anyone had given her credit for. If you have ever been in a place where you were slowly convinced that you were less than you are, where someone spent years teaching you not to trust your own mind, and then one day the door opened and you walked out and discovered you had been right about yourself the whole time. If you have ever felt that, this moment is yours. This right here. Zoe at that table, writing for 2 hours, remembering everything. This is the moment we do not scroll past. This is the moment we sit with. If you've been in that room, that quiet, shrinking room, drop something in the comments. Not an explanation. Not a full story. Just tell us you've been in that room. Because you are not wrong about yourself either. And if this channel is a place where you come to feel seen, subscribe and stay. The people already here, you'll find them in the comments. They know what you mean. The next 36 hours moved slowly the way time moves when you are waiting for something you cannot control. Richard came home that night, and they spoke normally, and she made pasta, and he talked about a meeting, and she listened, and responded, and said the right things, and none of it touched her anymore. She was watching the surface of her life from slightly behind herself, the way you watch a film you have already seen. She noticed things she had been trained not to notice. The way he interrupted her reflexively before she had even finished the sentence, and not because he was engaged, but because finishing her sentences was something she was permitted to do only up to a point. The way he framed everything she might want as something he was granting. The way her name, when he used it, was always slightly louder than necessary. Always. Slightly in the direction of an instruction. She had stopped needing his approval so recently, and so completely, that it was almost startling. Like realizing a noise you had been hearing for years had stopped, and the silence was not uncomfortable. The silence was extraordinary. Chul Mu called on the second morning. "It's done," he said. "What's done exactly?" "The clause in the divorce papers has been flagged by sources your lawyer will receive today. Your name has been removed from the financial architecture. On anyone looking at those accounts going forward will find nothing that leads to you." "How did you? That is not the part you need to know." She exhaled. "Okay. There is something else." His tone had changed very slightly. She had learned to listen to the small frequencies of how he spoke. This one was not alarm. It was something closer to a kind of careful preparation. "His partners," Chul Mu said, "have decided that Richard is a liability. They have been in contact with our team. In exchange for cooperation, they are willing to give us everything. Documentation. Records. Complete. Which means Richard Cole has no protection. Once those documents are handed over, the people he thought he was partnered with will be the people who end him. And we have enough to make certain the legal end of it is watertight." She was quiet. "He will be arrested," Chul Mu said. "Not today, but soon." She thought about Richard at the dinner party, about the laugh, about the tone of patient explanation. "Without me, you'd still be struggling somewhere." She thought about the clause in the legal documents, slipped in so neatly, so confidently, as if she would never notice, as if she was still the woman who noticed things and filed them under none of my business. "He really thought I wouldn't see it," she said. "He did not think about you carefully enough," Chul Mu said. "That is a failure of intelligence on his part." Something about the way he said that. Direct. No performance in it. No attempt to be charming. Just a plain statement of fact delivered by a man who had been watching her for months and had formed a clear opinion. She pressed her hand flat against the kitchen table, the same table where she had written for 2 hours and remembered everything. "What do I do now?" she said. "Sign the papers," he said. "Let him think he won the first round. The second round comes from a different direction. You won't need to be involved. You just need to be out of the building when it happens. Metaphorically. Practically, also. I would suggest staying somewhere else for the next week. You're serious. When am I not serious?" She almost laughed. It came out as a breath. "Never. You are never not serious. You are perhaps the most consistently serious person I have ever met." A brief pause on his end. "I have been told this. Does it bother you?" Another pause. This one different. "Not usually," he said. "Occasionally, I find it worth examining." She stood up from the table, walked to the window. Outside, the city moved in its enormous patterns, indifferent and magnificent. "I have a friend in Brooklyn," she said. "I can stay with her." "Good. Will I hear from you?" "Yes." One word. But the weight in it was a complete sentence. She ended the call and stood at the window a little longer. Then she went to her wardrobe and began, quietly and efficiently, to pack. She packed only what was hers. She did not take the jewelry he had given her. She did not take the coat he had bought. She took her documents, her laptop, the notepad full of 2 hours of memory, her certificates from a drawer she had not opened in 3 years, and 3 boxes of things she had brought from Lagos that had always been hers. She arranged everything in 2 bags with the focused calm of a woman who has made a decision and is now simply executing it. Richard came home to find her in the kitchen, making dinner as usual. He noticed nothing different. The bags were in the hallway closet behind the winter coats. She would take them on Saturday morning while he was at his standing golf appointment. She would not tell him she was leaving before she left. She had learned, finally, that she did not owe him a warning. The papers arrived from his lawyer on Friday. She read every line. She found the clause, now modified, now benign, just barely different from what it had been, but different enough. She signed on the lines indicated. She sent them back. Richard texted her an hour later. "Thank you for being mature about this. I hope we can part as adults." She read the message. She put her phone down. She finished her tea. Saturday morning, 7:45. Richard left for golf with his bag over his shoulder and told her he would be back by 2. She said, "Okay, have fun." He kissed her on the cheek. She watched the elevator doors close. She stood in the hallway for 30 seconds. Then she went to the closet, took her 2 bags, went back to the kitchen, left her keys on the counter, and walked out. The elevator descended. The lobby opened. The city outside the glass doors was gray and cool and moving. She pushed through the doors. Outside, the air hit her face, and she breathed it in, and it tasted, for the first time in a very long time, like it belonged to her. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A message from Chul-Mu. 3 words this time. "Are you out?" she typed back. 1 word. "Yes." 3 seconds later. "Good." She stood on the sidewalk outside the building that had been her address for 3 years, with 2 bags and a folder of certificates and the beginning of something she couldn't name yet, but could feel the outline of. And then she hailed a cab and told the driver, "Brooklyn, please," and got in, and watched Richard Cole's building shrink behind her through the rear window until it was gone. She did not cry. She was done crying for that chapter. The next one was hers to write. The week in Brooklyn was the quietest Zoe had been in years. Her friend Amara had a small apartment in Bed-Stuy, warm and slightly cluttered in the way that homes are cluttered when someone actually lives in them. Books on every surface, like a cat named Pepper, who treated new people with professional suspicion before deciding they were acceptable. Amara asked no heavy questions. She made jollof rice the first night and put a glass of wine in Zoe's hand and said only, "You look like yourself again." And that was enough. Zoe slept deeply for the first time in months. She woke up the second morning and opened her laptop and looked at the folder of her old certificates for a long time. International business degree, professional development courses she had completed in her first 2 years in America, a reference letter from her old manager at the property firm, written 3 years ago, still valid in its honesty. She made coffee and sat with the certificates the way you sit with something you buried a long time ago and are now carefully digging up to check if it still has life in it. It did. It had been waiting patiently the entire time. She started making notes. Not a full plan yet. Just the beginning of the shape of one. What she knew. What she could do. What she had learned in 3 years of watching Richard's business world from the inside, understanding how deals worked, how money moved, how people at that level made decisions. She had absorbed more than anyone had credited her for. She had been a silent student in a classroom she had not chosen, and the education, as it turned out, was real. Chul-Mu called on the 3rd day. "How are you?" he said. It was the first time he had asked her that. Not "how is the situation?" Not "what do you need?" So "how are you?" Which is a small question that can be a large one depending on who asks it and how. I'm good, she said. And then, because it was true, and she was done performing inaccurate versions of herself, I'm actually good, not performing it. Actually. I know the difference, he said. I know you do. A brief pause, the kind that holds something in suspension. The documents were transferred 2 days ago, he said. Richard's partners have given everything to the authorities. Federal investigators are involved. It will move quickly now. How quickly? Days, not weeks. She set her coffee down. He doesn't know yet. No, he thinks he is protected. He is telling people the divorce was his decision. He is, from what I understand, explaining to his social circle that you were never equipped for the life he provided. She almost smiled. Of course he is. He is also quietly beginning to move certain assets. Can he do that? He is trying. He will find it more difficult than he expects. There was a quality to how he said that. Precise. Settled. The voice of someone who has already placed the pieces and is simply waiting for them to fall. Chulmu, she said. Yes. Were you ever in danger because of this? Because of helping me specifically? A pause, longer than usual. My work carries its own risks, he said. That has nothing to do with you. That is not what I asked. Another pause. Some decisions I made regarding your situation were not strictly within the boundaries of the operation, he said carefully. God, there were conversations. Conversations. My team had questions about the level of direct contact I maintained with you. It was outside the standard approach. She absorbed this. And you answered those questions. I answered them. What did you say? The pause this time was the longest yet. She counted 4 full seconds. I said that the situation required direct management, he said, and that my judgment was sound. She looked out of Amara's window at the Brooklyn street below. A man walked a bicycle. 2 children argued cheerfully over something invisible. A woman in a red coat moved through all of it, like she had somewhere excellent to be. Was your judgment sound? Zoe asked quietly. Yes, he said. And then, after the smallest beat, though not entirely for professional reasons, she pressed her hand flat on the windowsill. It's okay, she said softly. Okay, he said. They stayed on the line for another few seconds, saying nothing, which was its own kind of conversation. And then he said he would call when there was news, and she said she would be here, and the call ended. She stood at the window for a long time after. Pepper the cat appeared and sat on the windowsill beside her and looked at the street with the same focused attention, which she appreciated. There was something to be said for company that did not require explanation. The news broke on a Thursday. Zoe was in a coffee shop around the corner from Amara's, working through her notes, when her phone began buzzing with messages from people she had not heard from in months. The kind of people who are silent during the quiet years and suddenly very communicative when something dramatic happens to someone they know. She ignored the messages and went to the news directly. Richard Cole, property developer and founder of Cole Capital Group, had been arrested that morning on charges of money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Federal investigators had been building the case for over a year. The charges were significant. His lawyer had issued a statement. The statement said nothing useful. There was a photograph. Richard in the gray coat, being walked to a car outside his building, his face doing something complicated. The face of a man who had spent 30 years believing certain things about himself and the world, and was now watching all of those beliefs go through a revision they had not consented to. Zoe looked at the photograph for a moment. She thought about the dinner party, about the corridor outside the study, about the clause in the legal papers, slipped in so neatly. She thought about the moment she had stopped counting to 6 and started counting on herself. She closed the news app and went back to her notes. Her phone buzzed one more time. Different number. She picked up. "You've seen the news," Chulmu said. "Yes." "Are you all right?" "I'm working," she said. "I'm making a business plan, or the beginning of one. I've been sitting in this coffee shop for 2 hours, and I've filled 4 pages. A pause. She heard something in it that she was starting to be able to identify. The particular quality of his silence when something she said had landed somewhere in him that he had not fully mapped yet. 4 pages, he said. "Topa, I have a lot of ideas," she said. 3 years of watching how a certain kind of business works from the inside. I have thoughts. I don't doubt that. I'm going to need a few months to build it properly, get the documentation in order, talk to some people." She paused. "I might need advice on the investment side eventually. Someone who understands how money moves." Another pause. Then, very carefully, as if he was placing the words down one at a time. "I might know someone. Might you?" "It's possible." She smiled at her notebook. "How convenient." "I thought so." She looked at the 4 pages of notes, the certificates in the folder beside her laptop, the beginning of something taking the shape of a real thing. "Chulmu," she said. "Yes." "I want to say something, and I want you to just hear it without turning it into a tactical assessment. A beat. I'll try. You didn't have to do what you did, the way you did it. You could have sent letters and stayed in the car. You could have managed the situation from a distance, the way you apparently usually do." She looked at the street through the coffee shop window. "You didn't. And I am not saying that because I feel like I owe you something. I'm saying it because it mattered. It mattered that someone stood in the dark and said, 'Stay quiet if you want to live,' and actually meant the second part. The line was quiet. Actually meant wanting you to live, she added, in case it needed saying. When he spoke again, his voice had that quality it sometimes had, stripped of the professional layer, just the thing underneath. "I did mean it," he said. "From the beginning, even when I told myself it was professional." "I know," she said. "I've known for a while." They both let that sit. "Dinner," he said then. 1 word, but it was doing a lot of work. "When I'm ready," she said. "I need a little time. For myself. Not for you. Not against you. Just for me. I understand that. Do you?" "Zoe." His voice was quiet, steady. The voice that had told her to stay quiet and take the long way home, and had been, underneath everything, telling her something else entirely for months. "Take whatever time you need. I will be here when you are done." She breathed. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "This is the moment. Right here, where this community earns its name. Because what just happened between those 2 people is not a small thing. It is what happens after you survive something, after you stop performing and start existing, after someone sees the real version of you, not the polished version, not the managed version, the real one, and says, 'I will be here when you are done.' If you've ever had to choose yourself first before you could choose anyone else, if you've ever had to take that time even when something good was waiting, subscribe to this channel right now. Not because of a number, but because this is the space where we tell those stories, where we honor that kind of decision. And if you have a story like this, even a piece of one, leave it below. Someone here needs to read it tonight. That is not a small thing either. 3 months passed. They were the best 3 months Zoe had spent in America. She registered a business consultancy. Small. Focused. On leveraging everything she had learned, and everything she had always known, and all of the plans that had been sitting in a locked drawer, waiting with extraordinary patience for this exact moment. Her first 2 clients came through a former colleague from the property firm, who had always respected her and never quite understood why she had disappeared. 2 more came through referrals. By month 3, she had a waiting list, which was not something she had anticipated, but received with the composure of a woman who has started to trust her own instincts again. She moved into her own apartment in October. Small, on the 3rd floor, with a window that got afternoon light. She furnished it slowly and deliberately, choosing each thing, nothing that was not hers. She called her mother in Lagos every Sunday. Her mother, who was 71 and had survived things that made Richard Cole look like a minor inconvenience, listened to everything and said, after a long pause, "I always told you that you were not built to be someone's decoration." Zoe laughed for the first time in a long time. A real one, the kind that surprises you. Richard's legal situation progressed through the machinery of consequence. His lawyer issued more statements. None of them helped. The charges held. The documentation was apparently thorough, which it would be, given who had spent 14 months assembling it. He was released on bail pending trial and moved into a smaller apartment in a different neighborhood and was no longer invited to the kind of dinners he used to host. Zoe did not follow the case closely. She followed it enough to know that her name appeared nowhere in it. And that was enough. She and Chul-Mu spoke every week. Not long calls, sometimes just 10 minutes. He asked about the business. She asked about whatever he was working on, which he described in the same careful, vague language he always used, and which she had stopped pushing against, because she understood by now that some parts of his world were not hers to enter, and she respected that the way she respected any honest boundary. He made her laugh more than she expected. Dry and precise, the humor of someone who finds the absurdity of the world genuinely amusing, but refuses to be loud about it. On a morning in November, she walked into a small cafe near her new apartment and sat down at a table by the window. She had been there about 5 minutes when the door opened. She had not told him she would be here. She had, without planning it consciously, chosen this cafe on this morning, the way you sometimes do a thing that your heart has decided before your head catches up. He stood in the doorway for a moment, coat dark, completely composed, looking at her the way he had looked at her the first time in the alley, reading a situation with total attention. Then he crossed the room and sat down across from her. They looked at each other. "You're here," she said. "You chose a cafe near your building," he said. "I know where your building is." "Were you watching again?" "Observing patterns." She smiled. He almost smiled back. That almost smile that had been practicing since the grocery store on 74th Street, and was getting closer to the real thing every time. "I'm ready," she said. He looked at her. The full, unhurried attention that was one of the truest things about him. "I know," he said. "How do you know?" "You came here alone first," he said. "You sat down. You ordered your own coffee. You were already here when I arrived." He paused. "A woman who needs someone else to complete her entrance is not ready. You were already complete." She looked at him for a long moment. "Kim Chul-Mu," she said. "Yes. That is one of the most unexpectedly beautiful things anyone has ever said to me." He considered this with great seriousness. "I was stating a fact." "I know," she said. "That's why it's beautiful." The coffee arrived. The cafe moved around them with its small, ordinary sounds. Outside the window, New York went on being enormous and indifferent and extraordinary, the way it always did, some regardless of what was happening to any one person inside it. They sat. They talked. Not about the past exactly, not about Richard or the operation or the alley on 72nd Street. They talked the way people talk when they have already survived the hard part and are now in the part that comes after, which is quieter and warmer and requires a different kind of courage than surviving. The courage of staying, of choosing. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held it. Outside, the morning went on. Richard Cole had told her she would come crawling back. She had walked out of a courthouse smiling instead, into a morning that belonged entirely to herself, into a life that she was building with her own hands, into a version of love that did not require her to be smaller than she was. Some people spend their whole lives teaching you to need them. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply stop. You stayed. From the very first line to this last one, you stayed. And if you felt something during this story, something in the chest that recognized itself, then you already know why this channel exists. It exists for the women who have been told they cannot survive without someone and proved that wrong in the quietest, most devastating way possible. It exists for the ones who signed the papers without begging, who packed 2 bags and walked out, who sat in coffee shops filling 4 pages of plans they had been carrying for years. If that is you, subscribe right now. Not for us, for yourself, for the version of you that kept going. Leave your name, leave a word, leave whatever you have. The comment section tonight is for the women who chose themselves. We see you. We have always seen you. And we will be here next time with another story that stays with you long after it ends.